Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. It is July 11th, and this is the Servant Leader Speaks. Of course, I'm McIntosh, and of course, the music in the background, "I Vow to Thee, My Country," is we don't have the rights to that music. It is simply part of our commitment going forward. But it's a wonderful day. We've had a wonderful independence celebration, and I would like to congratulate the organizers of the celebration on the park. But as we get started, there's a lot to talk about today, and I feel excited about what the Lord is going to say to us today regarding the independence. So let's just bow in a word of prayer and we will get started. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in your sight. I pray for your people as they listen, that they will hear your voice regarding the matter that we speak today. And when all is said and done, we give you the praise, the glory, and the honor in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you for those of you who are joining me, Felicia, Miss Purr, Kimberly, and all of those who come on live. We appreciate having you today. Well, this is an interesting show today. We're going to deal with some very spiritual matters as relates to how we go forward in the nation. And I am very much excited to talk about what I will talk about today. And so just join me. I'm not going to speak from a prepared text, so we're going to just be doing some teaching. So just give me a little latitude today, as I always ask of you. As we go forward today, what I'm going to speak about really is thank you, Amal. It's good to have you two join us, a young talented man. I'm so excited about the young people in this country. Sometimes we feel like all is lost, but it's not. There's a lot of young people who are talented, doing wonderful things in the country. I think the leadership of the country has to push and begin and continue to push forward and encourage young people to go forward. Thanks for joining us, Natalie. But as we get started today, and I was just sitting and I had intended actually to do an address regarding independence, but I have been divinely redirected, and so I will speak to you about what we will talk about today. In 1997, I was involved in the National Committee for Youth Renewal, a youth organization that I founded, and we had to close because of lack of funding, because of lack of support from the government of the day. But in 1997, the Lord gave me a vision and invited me to go to Washington, D.C. to speak to me about the Bahamas. One of the things that he said that made it forceful for me to go forward or to go to Washington, D.C. to the American University, the instruction was, do not be disobedient to the call. Now, I know I touched on this in our last broadcast, or one or two before, but I will go a little bit more in detail in regards to this. And even though I do, I will not even give you the half of a lot of this revelation. But because of the instructions to, excuse me, because of the instructions to go to the American University and not be disobedient to the call, I had to follow it up. What was interesting, after I got that particular revelation, several days later, a Korean man walked into my office, my makeshift office that I was at, Edward Smith's office, after we closed the National Committee for Youth's office, and he offered me an opportunity to go all expense paid trip to a youth convention in Washington, D.C. I went ahead. When I got to Washington, D.C., after the convention was over, I went to the American University, and within minutes, I was signed up to begin a course at the American University several months later, which was in January. So that was in November when I went to the course, when I went to the convention that I was invited to. So several months later, which was February of 1998, I left Nassau, and this is a testimony, I left Nassau with a one-way ticket, $30 in my pocket, headed to the American University. I did not have any money, nor was I aware where I was going to stay. But I made my trip to go to the Atlanta and then to Washington, D.C., and so that I can enter the American University. Well, I did challenge God that if he brought me here, he would have to do what he had to do if he did really call me. So that was the biggest faith walk of my life. If he did call me to go to Washington, he would have to work out everything. So I never told my sisters that I did not have any money when I stopped in Atlanta, Georgia. I just proceeded to Washington. Well, to make a long story short, as the Lord said, so he did. Because when I got to Washington, D.C., February 8th, 1998, I was left with $6.17 in my pocket. And the reason I'm saying this so that you would understand the message that I would get when I was in Washington, D.C. had to have been authenticated by a miracle of me going. When I got to Washington, D.C., as I said, I got to the American University. I'm left with 17 cents in my pocket, goes to the advisor's office. I could not enter the class at that time because I was a little late, but I know I could not go back. The Lord had really pushed on me to get out of Nassau, so I left Nassau. To make a long story short, the advisor gave me papers so I could get my ID, get set on the campus for at least for the next semester. When that was done, I went over to the Foreign Student Service. When I got there, there was a young lady waiting to see me. She was the person that was sent to assist me by the Lord, not nobody. She just asked me where I was going to stay. I was not aware. She gave me a phone number. She took me to have something to eat. And I left the university around 4 o'clock wondering, how am I going to get back to the embassy? A young man stopped. And he was a student of the seminary down the street. Picked me up, took me to the embassy. And probably about an hour later, I was chauffeured to an apartment where the Lord had prepared for me. The person who was living there in the room that I was about to rent moved out 4 days later. I'm saying this to say that although there was no plans made for me to go to Washington, D.C., every call I made didn't make anything concrete. Only thing was concrete is that the American University was where I was going. During the 17 days between February 7th, February 8th, and February 25th was the most miraculous days I had ever encountered. I got a desk, somebody brought me a bed, I found a church, and everything that I actually needed was there. So by the time as I settled myself and relaxed and say, okay, God, you brought me here, now that you've given me a miracle, because when you leave home with a one-way ticket, you can't even turn back. And when you have no money, you can't do anything. But nonetheless, I was provided with someplace to live, somewhere, someplace to sleep. I was provided with everything that I needed, including a friend who thought of me with everything she did. If she bought a chopstick for her, she bought one for me. If she bought a sweater for her, she bought one for me. I'm saying that to say that it was authenticated. The trip, the going was authenticated. God opened every door. So on the 25th of February, 1998, I was awoken with 3 concrete instructions. The most powerful instructions, and it changed my life. That was 21 years ago. These were the 3 instructions, and I've said this over and over for 21 years. Run 39 candidates under the banner of the Bahamas Constitution Party. Ask Christian men and women to make themselves available to serve. Go to Sir Lyndon and exact from him the original intent of the Constitution. At that time, the F&M government was in power. Strong government, government in the sunshine, everything was going on. So when I got these instructions, I'm like, what am I supposed to do with these instructions, Lord? As I walked about in the university, considering why do I have these instructions? What am I supposed to do with these instructions? I recalled, or the Lord brought back to my memory, a prophecy that was spoken over my life 11 years prior. The prophecy said that I would do something great and wonderful and spectacular. The person who spoke to me, Prophet S.D. James, said he did not know what it was. God had not told him what it was, but that I would enter an institute of higher learning, and when I did, then the Lord would speak to me. And surely it was. He spoke to me when I got to American University. Now, I'm saying this so that people will understand if God calls you to leadership, he must speak to you himself. It cannot just be somebody prophesying over your life. Because just as he spoke to Moses, he spoke to Joshua, didn't he? He called Moses in the burning bush, and he spoke to him. When Moses had finished his work and he called Joshua, he said to Joshua, as I was with Moses, I will be with you. So he spoke to him just that strong. Now this is where it gets interesting. Because as I walked about in the university and thinking about this word, I couldn't even figure out how am I going to call Nassau and talk about this. But April 3rd, 1998, this was the most powerful revelation I have ever had in my entire life. I've never even had that experience. But April 3rd, as I continue to think about what do I do with this word, how do I speak this word to the Bahamian people, the Lord began to speak to me. And he opened that morning, I'm sitting on my bed, the mattress on the ground. That's how students do. You have to do what you have to do when you're a student in a university. We don't sleep in beds. We sleep on mattresses on the ground. Could anybody testify to that? But that morning, I was in my prayer, and he took me to Ezekiel chapter 40. And for those of you who have your Bible, you need to go there because you will see what I'm talking about. In that first 4 verses, I heard the Lord begin to speak. And guess what it said? In the 25th year of our captivity, on the 10th day of the month, in the beginning of the year, he sent an angel with a rod, and he stood in the gate. Now, I'm paraphrasing, so if you're reading your Bible, you will see what I'm saying. He said, in the 25th year of our captivity, on the 10th day of the month, in the beginning of the year, he sent an angel with a rod who stood in the gate. Let me tell you why that's exciting. Because in 1998, that was the 25th anniversary of the Bahamian independence. When he said in the beginning of the year, what is the beginning of the year when we're talking about of years and of months and of countries? July is the beginning of the year for the Bahamas. And he said the 10th day of the month. When is our independence? 10th day of July. So July being the beginning of our month. The 10th day of the month, July 10th, is the independence, and in 1998, it is the 25th year of our captivity. When I heard that, I knew he had begun to say something that was important to us. But I have to read for you verse 4. Verse 4 says, and the man said unto me, that's the angel who stood in the gate, according to Ezekiel. And the man said, Son of man, behold with thine ears, and hear, behold with thine eyes, hear with thine ears, and set thine heart upon all that I shall show thee, for the intent that I will make this known unto you, I have brought you to this place. Pastor Corley, I see you there. So I know you can bear witness to what I'm saying. He said, I want you to see with your eyes, listen with your ears, and set your heart upon all that I am going to tell you, because that is the reason I brought you to Washington. When I heard that, I knew the Lord was speaking. If you can, please share the video so somebody else can hear this message. When I heard that, I know he was talking. The Lord was talking to me about the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. He spoke to me in 1997 in October, and I said, I want you to go to Washington, D.C. I want to speak to you. Do not be disobedient to the call. So I took them to task. I couldn't find any money for the entire 6 to 8 weeks until I took a step of faith, borrowed a ticket from the Highlanders, and I left Nassau with $30 in my pocket and said, Lord, if you want me, if you really sent me to Washington, you have to open up every door. And suddenly he opened every door. So when he began to speak to me about these things, I know he was speaking. I knew this was something that I needed to pay attention to. I'm saying that because it is important that any time the Lord is going to make a mandate concerning something as important as this, he will speak specifically. Now, after I got that particular word, I began to pay attention. I read the entire chapter of chapter 40, 41, 42. By the time I get to 43 of Ezekiel chapter 40, the Lord opened up revelation I have never heard. I've never even had access to. I'm not sleeping. I'm sitting down in my bed, and he opened up into my mind words that I've never heard it. I've never seen anything so strong in my life. Now this is what he said. The Lord said to me in 1930s, in the 1930s, in the 1940s, in the 1950s, that he heard the cry of the Bahamian people. He said the Bahamian people, his Bahamian bride, his people who lived in these islands during that time, saying unto him, give us our land, make us free in the place of our birth, take us out of this slavery, this mistreatment, deliver us. This is the cry that he is saying to me in 1998 that he heard from the Bahamian people. Let me draw you one example of what mistreatment, and many of you who have spoken to your parents will have stories of mistreatment. My mother said to me she was working for a particular family, and this family, this woman said to her before she left out to go to her business, Jane, I want you to have your breakfast in this plate. That was the plate that she fed her cat. But she asked my mother, who was a young girl, to have breakfast in that plate. Now I'm saying that to say, that's the kind of treatment these people were doing to our people. So our people, those of my color, and those persons who are poor, just living in this place, just being mistreated, coming out of slavery into colonialism, they said, Lord, give us our land, make us free, take us out of this mistreatment. There has to be a better way for us to live. And God said he heard their prayer. He said he raised up the PLP, Cartwright, Milton Taylor, those persons who formed the PLP. God said he raised up the PLP to begin the deliverance to the Bahamian people. But he chose Lyndon Oscar Pendling. He was a young man, 22 years old, just came back from school. In fact, he came straight back from school, went straight to the PLP office and said, I am here to serve. But he didn't just come because he wanted to come. God picked him, appointed him. Thank you, Marie Nemo, listening from Grand Bahama. God said to me, I chose Lyndon Oscar Pendling to answer the prayers of the Bahamian people. That is what happened. He said, I raised up Lyndon Pendling to answer the prayers that was made by our forefathers regarding what they need in this land. He said he raised up Lyndon Pendling for several things: to get majority rule, to bring us to independence, internal self-governance. See, because we're complaining that we don't have independence, but that's all right. That's just a pure status thing. We're going to change that soon. But the fact is, they had to do what they had to do. So he brought majority rule and independence in 1973 without bloodshed in order to facilitate the prayers of the Bahamian people. Now, what was the desire of the Bahamian people? And what they said in their promise is, God, if you give us our land and make us free, we will give you this nation as a Christian nation and our children as a pledge. Now that's a powerful prayer, right? Our forefathers promised the Lord that if he make them free, if he take them out of post-slavery and colonialism, out of mistreatment by the people who ruled this land, they would give him the Bahamas as a Christian nation and the children as a pledge. That is a powerful need, desire, and powerful contract. Now, according to this revelation, the preamble of the Constitution is a contract between God and the Bahamian people because of the answered prayer. That's what the preamble of the contract is, and I will read that in a short while. The preamble of the Constitution is a contract between God and the Bahamian people as a pledge or part of the pledge of answered prayer. Now, before I read the preamble of the Constitution, I have a couple of things to say. In 1998, in furtherance of this revelation, he said to me, he sent his angel to see if the contract with the Bahamian people was still enforced. Now that's powerful. He's turning my life upside down almost, because he's telling me things that I know not of. I was too young to know. He said, but in 1998, he said, I send my angel to see if the contract was still enforced with the Bahamian people. Now he said he did not see in the nation what was in the contract. We prayed, our forefathers prayed. He answered us with majority rule in 1967 and independence in 1973. But in 1998, the nation had gone awry. So he says, tell the people, I don't see in the nation what is in the contract. And that is something that needs to be. I'm just trying to get my page today. It's kind of stuck today. But he says, I don't see in the nation what is in the contract. I don't see in the nation what you promised me. I don't see in the nation what I paid for. Now, I paid for a nation without bloodshed so that you could give me a Christian nation and you could give me your children. Let me tell you something. When you talk about children, when you talk about the next generation, it is always important to God. In fact, in any major religion, the next generation or the children is very important. So if you promise him your children, God says, I need it back. I'm sorry if I give you this on the count of you promising me your children, I will give you whatever you need. That's why he gave us majority rule, he gave us independence. But then this was the final thing he said. He says, now I want my nation back. I want my nation back. I give you a nation, I give you majority rule, I give you independence, but I don't see in the nation what is in the contract. And I want my nation back. So in the last 21 years, I have declared this over and over. Sometimes I've gotten tired, but I've declared it because we have seen that both successive governments of both the PLP and the FNM have failed to return the nation back to God. He says, I want my nation back. Because of this message, now this is very important for you to understand. Because of me preaching this message from 1998, both the PLP and the FNM has asked preachers and pastors to be on their ticket during the election. This whole point of putting pastors and preachers on their tickets of both the PLP and the FNM was simply to negate the message of the Bahamas Constitution Party. The message that God said, I want to find a way to get my nation back. So they have put preachers and pastors on their ticket, which is a good thing, right? It's a good thing. But none of them have actually attempted to return the nation as promised, as implied, as contracted, as articulated, as is articulated in the preamble of the Constitution. And now I will read what that contract says. Thank you so much, Euterpe, my schoolmate, for joining us. Yvette Johnson, thank you so much for joining us. But let me read what the preamble of the Constitution says. This is the contract between God and the Bahamian people regarding the prayers, regarding the accomplishment of majority rule and independence, internal self-governance, as we want to call it. Whereas 481 years ago, the rediscovery of this family of islands, rocks and keys heralded the rebirth of the New World. And whereas the people of this family of islands recognize that the preservation of their freedom will be guaranteed by a national commitment to self-discipline, industry, loyalty, unity, and an abiding respect for Christian values and the rule of law. Now know ye therefore, hi Judy, we the inheritors of and successors to this family of islands, recognizing the supremacy of God and believing in the fundamental rights and freedom of the individual, do hereby proclaim in solemn praise the establishment of a free, democratic, sovereign nation founded on spiritual values, in which no man, woman, or child will ever be slave or bondsman to anyone, or their labor exploited, or their lives frustrated by deprivation, and do hereby provide by these articles of the indivisible unity and creation under God of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. That is the contract. And in fact, the author of this preamble, Sir Arthur Folks, said it was much longer than that. It expressed the desire and the aspirations of the Bahamian people. But these 2 paragraphs were the only bit of information that the colonial office saw fit to give us. They didn't want all, and it could not go in 1969. They attempted in the 1969 Constitution, but it was not able. They needed an independence constitution in which to put this preamble, this contract with God to the Bahamian people. It needed to be in an independent constitution. So that is the contract between us and God. Your forefathers prayed. They promised me, give me freedom, give us our land. We will give you this nation as a Christian nation. We will give you our children as a pledge. So he says, this is my nation. I give it to you. I want it back. Either give it back to me or I will take it back. That's kind of powerful. What does it mean to take back? The Bahamian people have chosen man over God every time. You've seen that. As I said a little earlier, both parties have placed preachers on their ticket in order to negate this message, but they have not attempted, in regards to the preamble of the Constitution, to take the nation back in the place that God wants it. And we've seen that. I mean, presently we have 10 preachers in the House of Assembly. Yet there is revelation of corruption in our house. It is not that everyone is corrupt. It simply says, as a group, as a government, the attempt has not been made. So what are we looking back in regards to God taking back the nation? The fact that we are in trouble at this time, it is because we have chosen God over man. That's the reason why we're where we are. But what does it look like taking back? Let's talk about WTO And I'm not an expert on WTO. That's for Kendall Colebrook. He's a expert on WTO, and we've seen his videos. He knows what to put there. He's been studying this for years. We have many persons, like Paul Morse and some other persons who've talked about it, Fane Thompson. WTO is a payback. They're coming back for the nation that God gave us with independence. Our natural resources is gone. We've got 12% VAT. Our national debt is $8.8 billion, almost 80%. Some people will argue with that. Almost 80% of GDP. And guess what? The UBP is back. The whole point of majority rule and independence was to remove the UBP from power and allow the Bahamian people to live free people in their country. But it is clear that the UBP is back. The Bahamian people has determined that they don't want God. As a general statement, they want man. Party politics have become greater in the minds of the Bahamian people, including the Christian church, than God. So God will give them what they want. Thank you, Dr. Hinsey. God will give you what you want when you ask for it. God will give you man when you ask for man. So God is letting man, which includes this government, give you what you ask for. The sting of your life. We're seeing it. And these revelations regarding corruption to the core is in a place where we are getting what we asked for. So when God say God or me or that, which one? You can't serve God and mammon. You got to make up your mind. And there's nothing wrong with money. It answered all things. Nonetheless, you have to make a decision when God calls for a decision. And whether you like it or not, the F&M is giving the country back to the UBP. Now that's my only political statement for today. The F&M is giving the country back to the UBP. You don't have to believe me. We have returned, basically, almost, to pre-majority rule independence. And unless God do something, that's where we're going. But that's okay. It's the people's time. It is the people's time. It is your time. It is your call. That's where we are. It is your call. If we don't make a decision to stand on the side of God, we're going back before where we get what we have gotten. Who is on the Lord's side? It's time to stand up. That's just where we are. And I thank God for the intercessors that have been on the wall. Because if they weren't praying, we were going back wholesale. But the fact that the intercessors are praying, the fact that the intercessors have prayed, God has created an intervention. That's what we're seeing now. The revelation that is happening now in the country, it is because of the prayers of the intercessors. God asked one day, can I find a man who's going to hold up my work? Could I find an intercessor? And clearly he has found some praying people in this nation. Some praying women, like Dr. Elaine Hinsey, who has called for the praying women to come forward. God can't do it unless we pray. And the intervention now is because of the prayers of the saints. And I am excited that God has created this intervention. I've said it to some people earlier, that God wanted an intervention. They didn't pay attention to my call for an intervention, but God is doing his own intervention. He is taking his measures in his own hand. And we thank God for creating an intervention on behalf of his people. He will not allow us to go to WTO. He will not allow that the Bahamian people will go back to the UBP. We are not going back there, people. We have to decide we're going to stand up for God because he has stood up for us. So now we must stand up for him. And I stand up for him. I stand up for him will take the nation back. He says, I just need some people. I will tell you something. And I struggle about saying this, but I will say it anyhow. And I want you to know that what I'm telling you in regards to this revelation is probably half. It's probably 50% of what really, you're going to have to see the rest of it in the book, How to Reconstruct a Nation. But what I'm saying is what it is we need now. The first day after independence, in 2012, the Lord said to me, I'm sitting on my bed waiting for my lunch on a Sabbath afternoon. And the Lord said to me, you are my hope for Bahamaland. And I sat up and I says, what do you mean? Why would you say such a thing? I mean, I couldn't even imagine. Why would he say so? He says, because only you would take this agenda this far. Well, I thought about it and I cried. Because, you know, a lot of third parties, they start, and the minute the pressure comes upon the third party, they just go ahead and join the other parties. But for 21 years, and I don't understand, I can't, only God would have kept me for 21 years. And the only reason I've stood is because I knew he spoke to me. I knew it. I could not deny it, and I had no authority when I was asked to join the PLP, asked to join the FNM, asked to join the DNA. I could not move. You know why? Because I knew he spoke. He said his desire is, I want my nation back, and you either give it back to me or I'm going to take it. But he's prepared because of those praying women to take it back. But after I cried about this hope for Bahamaland, that's where it came from, hope for Bahamaland. He said to me, give me 39 Christian men and women and I will give you a new Bahamas. So you wonder why, despite all of the things that I've gone through, and I could tell you the amount of times I have been under attack. I've lived under attack for many years. My phone has been tapped for many years. My life has been under threat many times. I've been taken to the hospital at least 3 times. One time without blood in my body. A second time without blood pressure. They had to put 2 drips. They couldn't understand how my pressure could have been so low and I'm still sitting up in the bed. The third time in 2016, according to the doctors at Princess Margaret Hospital, I had almost fatal viral encephalitis. The only reason it wasn't fatal because I woke up. Thanks be to God. But God wants to produce a new Bahamas. And he will do that when we can find 39 men and women who are prepared to stand with God concerning his plan for the nation. Not other political parties' plan for the nation, God's plan for the nation. He said, this is my nation, and I want it back. Whether you like it or not, I have the keys to the new Bahamas. I've been given delegated authority for the new Bahamas. And on this road towards 90 to 47 years, we are now at a crossroad. The Bahamas is at a crossroad. Yes, people, I need you to pray for me. I want you to continue to keep me covered in prayer. We are at a crisis of trust. Brave David said it himself. The people no longer trust the government. We are at a crisis of leadership in the nation. What do we do next? Both the PLP and the FNM has abandoned the preamble of the Constitution in the governance of the nation. Of course we read it. I'm glad it's being propagated every time we play the national anthem on the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas. I smile, I thank God that it is there. But both successive governments has abandoned the preamble of the Constitution. And I am happy to have seen it said, even in the celebrations 2 days ago, They have abandoned Christian values in the governance. They have abandoned the rule of law. You cannot live without the rule of law. You cannot live without self-discipline as the very primary basis by which you organize yourself, by which you lead people. We must go back to the foundation. We must go to what the founders intended. If we stay here, we will die. We have nothing to lose except the country, the nation, our independence. There is so much more I can say. But I want you to understand that the decision that we must make as a nation is whether we want God or we want man. It is that simple. I thank you so much for all of you who have joined me. And I wish to invite you who are prayer warriors. I see you, Sister Rosalie Farrington, Judy Roll, all of you who are prayer warriors, and all of those who wish, please continue to keep me covered in prayer. I have no other choice but to speak what God says to speak and to do what he says do. I don't even have, I can't even do anything else other than what he says. So I must speak. I want you to keep me in prayer. And if you are one of those persons that you believe that God is called to the nation, you must make yourself ready now. The nation is in crisis of trust. It is in crisis of leadership. And this is God's time to do for the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, which he has said he is ready to move. This is his intervention. And if we do not be ready for when he is ready to move, we will lose again. We cannot go back to slavery. We cannot go back to colonialism. We cannot go back to where we've come from. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much, all of you prayer warriors, Sister Coralie Brathwaite, who's also celebrating 28 years. But this year, as I close, this year is the 20th anniversary of the launch of this call for righteous governance. This year, 20 years ago, May 14, 1999, we officially launched this desire. And since then, we have contested election 2002, 2012, 2017, and we shall be prepared when God is ready to go to the next general election. So stay tuned for all that God is going to do in the country. I love you. I love the Bahamian people. I will stand with God as long as he allows me to do so. And I want you to continue to pray for me. And for those who are called to leadership, you can find me. And in closing, as we celebrate 46 years of internal governance, freedom from colonialism, and we start on year 47, I pray that God bless and keep safe the people, the children, the nation of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you very much for your time.